Hi everyone. So I wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about a workflow enhancement or a productivity enhancement that I use when I'm working on a game that allows me to compartmentalize or break up into manageable chunks the ability to visualize the amount of work that I have to do and the amount of work that I have left to do for a specific part of my game. And we're not talking about laying out an entire game project from point A to point B, but the little steps in between. And so, not to sidebar too much here, but as an example, this morning I had modeled this small alarm clock. It didn't take very long, maybe an hour or two. I got it into Substance Painter and just did an even simpler form of materialization on this, probably about 30 minutes to an hour of it. I am not using a PBR workflow. I'm using just a Universal Render Pipeline workflow for their simple lit shader, which is just has a specular map in it. So very simple shading, makes my work a little bit easier. And then I got this asset into Unity, this asset that I'm calling it's just alarm clock. Again, it's not PBR, so it's very simple. Specular shading on here. We can see that it is the Universal Render Pipeline Simple Lit. So this asset was something that I knocked out this morning, and then I'll move on into my list of assets that are the next for me to do. And so that's where I'm going to kind of go on here real quick. So as I'm working on this list of assets, I'm working on a game called The Answer Is Never. It takes place in the mid-'80s, follows a female character named Samantha who's really into skateboarding and stuff like that. And it tells a story of some issues that she's dealing with. And I'm not a concept artist, so I generally use reference imagery or sometimes just look at the concept art that others have worked on to sort of help roughly guide me as a reference. Not building this obviously off this person's artwork one-to-one, but just as a guideline to say, hey, these are the sort of elements that would be in a bedroom of a teenager back then. You know, a table lamp, a single bed, a Rubik's Cube maybe, a skateboard, a TV, things like this. And it helps me write down a list of these elements that I need in this environment. Now, there is an entire house. So in my game, I think of the environment as the entire house. But again, to compartmentalize what I have to do, I take it 2 weeks at a time in a sprint, and I say I need to get the bedroom done, just the bedroom part of the environment, completely fleshed out with the art assets and the ability to walk around the bedroom and interact or look at elements. And so looking at the reference, whether that's a picture or concept art or something like this, I come up with a list of items, and I think it was about 26 elements or items that I needed as set dressing or props or hero elements in this room to fill the room out, basically make this room something more like a movie set or a cartoon background to be able to put my character in and tell the story. And so I am in Google Drive. I really like to use Google Drive. This is one of my folders of reference imagery for interiors of the home that I'm using, and then I'll use Google Sheets and Google Drive to lay out these assets. I've called this sheet player bedroom. The next one may be living room or kitchen. That will have quite a few elements in it. I'll need to list out all the assets I need. So in this case, for her bedroom, I've listed out things such as TV, desk lamp, student desk, and these are the core elements I need, the minimal elements that I need to tell the story in this room. All right. And this is, again, specifically tracking 3D content that I'm creating, models, textures, and materials. I have not propagated out my 2D section yet, but I do have my 3D. And so for me, since I'm the only one working on this game internally, I know a yes means I do have the textures and materials done. Okay, so this column basically could just be in our case, a completed or ready to be put into the game engine. They're rendering and ready, really. So it's a yes or a no. Is it ready? No. Red for no. Green for yes. You could use any colors that you want. Now I've taken this column here, this entire column, and I've created what's called conditional formatting in Google Sheets. So if you right click on any cell, you look down on cell actions, you see conditional formatting. If we look in here, you can select a range or a single cell, and you can apply some rules to it. Is it empty? Does the text start with a letter, end with a letter or a number, a date, a value greater than or in between, or even a custom formula? One of my most common usages for it is, does it contain text that is something, right? So in this case, my conditional formatting is text contains yes. I turn that cell green. If text contains the word no, I turn that red. I can go in here and update my rule, and as you see right there, it turns purple, which is kind of nice, actually. And this allows me, with my artist mind that doesn't like to read sometimes, so looking for the yes or no's, it could just get a little crazy looking down a column at a bunch of yes and no's to gauge what have I done and what do I have left to do. And I can look at this just at a glance if I just even squint my eyes without the words, and I see, oh my goodness, there's a lot of red, so I have a lot to do. To even simplify this even more, I made a little area over here where I said, well, I need a percentage that tells me how much I have left to do to complete the player's bedroom. I'll be ready to put my player controller in there, run around the room, set up some UI, and test out the storytelling in that area. Well, it says here I have 62% of these assets to complete or do, 62% of the workload left before I'll have all of these assets ready. So how did I get there? Okay, so in the total here for left to do, it gives me a percentage. And so what I'm doing is a percentage calculation up here. There's this little formula bar right here. If I click it, and we click it, we will actually show the formula here. So I use the equals will sort of complete the formula, ABS, so that we have an absolute number. There's never any negatives. And then this is a very common formula for finding a percentage between the difference between two values. You can Google this in Google Sheets, how to find a percentage difference between two values or two numbers. So in this case, it takes G7, which is what I've finished. I have 10 of them that I've written yes next to, and that means they're finished. If we look at my rule for that in G7, it is just if it's not empty, and I'm using a formula in here called count if. So I want to count the amount of yeses in C4 to C50. So here's column C, here's row 4, that's where that starts the count, and then it goes down to 50. That was 50 is just in case I have to add more assets. It will still be able to count through those all the way down to row 50. So that gives me some leeway in the future for growth. Hopefully I don't have growth and I don't need more assets. So count if is a really cool Google Sheets formula for counting some kind of value, like all of the 2s, all of the ones that are blue, all of the ones that say yes. And so in this case, it counts all the ones that say yes, and it says all the ones that are yes, there's 10 of them. Okay, so the total, another count if, and this count if is C4 through C50, same exact amount of attributes we're going through, but the star just says count anything that may be in that column. So if there's any data in there, anything, a value, a character, count it. And that's how it gets the total. This is the total amount of assets that I need to do. Okay, there's 26. Even though we're on row 29 because we have a couple of rows here just filled with labels and that are empty, but we have 26 assets because we've counted all of the rows in here that have content in them. If it has content in it, that means there's an asset there that needs to be done. That's a total. And then of course the completed are all the ones yes, and then the not completeds are all the ones, if we look at the formula, that say no. It's that same count if formula, but it says no. So they're not done, they're done. This is completed. The left to do percentage comes from that formula of saying, look at G7, which is how many have we completed? Let's subtract the total, right? The total amount of things that I have to do. And then let's take that value and then let's divide it by that same total. And then you get that percentage, right? You get a percentage. And again, I put the ABS Let me go back up to the total. I'll put that ABS in there because it will return. You are, in this case, the completed minus the total is a negative number, and I want an absolute percentage. I want it to be an absolute number, so I don't want it going negative, and it returns 62. Now, to format it as a percentage, you just go up here in this little icon here, format as a percent, and then you can move your decimal places. As you can see, there are actually decimal places in there if you really want to see those. I usually just remove them and allow it to do a bit of rounding to the closest whole number. So this tells me 62% of the work left. So let's prove out that this works. Alarm clock, I just wrapped up this morning. So I'm just going to type yes in there and hit enter. As we see, it turns green. My completed has bumped up now to 11 completed. And I have 58% of the work left to do. I've still got a lot of work to do on this bedroom environment. But that makes me feel really good now. Go take a break, get some food, get some coffee, and I can see that I've actually taken that down out of the 60s and I have 58% of the work to do. This is also really good for if others are asking for a report from you, like, how are you doing on that set of assets? And you're like, well, how do I quantify that, right? Well, I've spent this many days or this many hours on it, and I'm going to guesstimate I have this many hours or this many days on it to do. If you had something like this to show your teammate or your manager or your boss, and you could say, well, I've completed 11, I have 15 to go, I'm about 50% of the way done, this will get you really far. Being able to give them this data. The only thing it's not giving you, which would be cool, is if I were tracking how long I took to do some of these assets. And then it could give me a breakdown here and say, this is how much time it's probably going to take you to wrap this up, wrap up this player bedroom. So I thought I would share a little bit of this workflow stuff here, how I manage this. And like I said, I compartmentalize the whole bigger game. And I make it more reasonable and small. So I've got a lot of stuff left to do. I've got a lot of assets that were open source assets and stuff like that, or free to download with crediting the author. And I still need to go in here. I do maintain a credits list here. Polyhaven is a really good place where they give you the CCO licensing assets, and they give those to you free. But you need to go in and make sure you give credit to the original creator. And I need to go in there and materialize a lot of this stuff. But again, it's VR. And because it is on a Quest 2 headset, and I'm going to have performance implications like I would on Android, I'm going with the simplified shader. So I'm going to do a non-PBR workflow with specularity. And it still looks pretty good on the headset. Hopefully this technique helps folks and helps you sort of manage your workloads.